On today's episode of the DeRaud Messenger Show, we're giving a little recap of the recent weeks in terms of our giveaways, and it's bye week, so that means we got bye week things. Longhorns fans, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. It's greatly appreciated. And check us out at HornSports.com for all the latest in Texas news. Now, Dylan, as I said, this is a little mini recap in sorts. We're talking about the last couple of weeks of Texas play, most recently with a narrow win against Vanderbilt. But of course, following or prior to that, excuse me, the Georgia loss, which I know is still upsetting to many, rightfully so, because that was not pretty. But then, Dylan, you got the game against Oklahoma in which the Longhorns really took it to the Sooners, although it took a little while for that to get off the ground. Now, Dylan, recently, maybe what's been something that you're hoping to see improved after this off week?
Yeah, well, what I'd like to see improve, Devon, is just the overall way in which the Longhorns are playing when it comes to beating themselves. Because that's the biggest thing going into this. Like, are they going to win their bye week? Like, they're practicing with each other, and there could just be things going catastrophically wrong, like during some of these games where you get out to a 21-7 lead against Vanderbilt, and all of a sudden Diego Pavia is mounting somewhat of a comeback towards the end of the game, or just keeping the Commodores in it against Texas. And I just feel like we've seen it when it comes to Georgia. Like I feel like even Stark talked about it, but getting away from their balanced game plan against Georgia and falling behind by obviously 20 plus points going into the first half and then having to work its way back. It just felt like Texas has got out of rhythm a lot. And in this bye week, I'd like to be able to see that rhythm come back just through play calling, uh, play by Ewers, right? The offensive line. Big reason they were winning these games to start the season was because Ewers looked like, you know, young Jared Goff in the way that he's just completing every pass known to man. And this offensive line is just getting pushed up front, and they're able to do it ever they want to opposing defenses. So personally, during the bye week, I would hope that that's what they're working on, which I'm sure they are. But that would be like what I'd like to see coming out of it.
Well, Dylan, you're talking about rhythm there, and then you mentioned, of course,
They ain't got no rhythm, Devin. They ain't got
okay, you're talking about quarterbacking. I'm playing that off, and then the offensive line, and of course, we've discussed the quarterback issues, but a large part of that, as we've also discussed in these past videos, is that offensive line. And in terms of rhythm, they're doing the penalties have just been awful. I believe in Sark's Monday press conference, he said that 7 of the 10 penalties they suffered against Vanderbilt were at, I mean, Dylan, it's hard to say bad times, but just very unfortunate times, because all penalties should be abolished, right, in an ideal world. But 7 out of 10 hurting the team just quite mightily last weekend against Vanderbilt. And then penalties have been an issue that's plagued the Longhorns offensively in recent weeks. Of course, Georgia got, just they're doing belts out if we're being honest. But a large part of that game too was Texas just shooting themselves in the foot time and time again. Penalties, penalties, penalties. Doing discipline week, I think, for the bye week. If they had a Thunderdome, this is the week to run that out. And just
I think during the bye week, the offensive linemen should be playing with clubs on their hands so they can't hold the defenders and then play from there, right? It's kind of like, batting practice before a game at baseball or using the donut, right? Like, I feel like if you can block with clubs in your hands,
well that.
you can just block whatever.
Oh gosh, well that and also just the amount of false start penalties as well. I
That
mean,
too.
of course, Nashville, I'm sure it was plenty loud, but it looked like half of that stadium was Texas fans, so you can't really justify that it was louder than any away environment should be doing because
Mm.
it was, very burnt orange, happy and friendly. And then, like you're talking about, the clubs on the hands, I think that's a good idea. Some penalties, though, Dylan, I don't know how you can prepare for. I mean, the Vernon Broughton targeting, I think it was ended up being called. I mean,
Yeah, that was rough.
there's no club on the hand trick for that one. That was just, too late, and it took back a pick six. Just not great. Penalties, penalties, penalties. I think we've really hit that point hard. What have you liked from Texas these past couple of weeks on the flip side, and what do they need to continue to do? I think one being, Dylan, if you want to take this, you can. One just being the defensive play. in the secondary especially. I know Makuba was out for this past weekend's matchup, but Michael Taft with the interception and a forced fumble, and then Jade Barron being, a Thorpe Award midseason candidate. And Dylan, honestly, I think I've seen a lot of people give him the midseason Thorpe Award if it were an actual award that you can give out at midseason. What have you liked about these Longhorns as of late?
Yeah, I mean, I think you were talking about it there with just the defense. And obviously Georgia was able to move the ball, specifically running it with ETN. But I just feel like with Vanderbilt, Georgia, the two most recent games, in order to move the ball on Texas, you got to be pinpoint accurate with the football and you got to make the right reads because the moment that you make a mistake, Texas is at all times ready to capitalize on those. And that's what I felt like has been a good marker for this team's improvement over last year, specifically within the secondary, is they're able to make those turnovers, right? And even if a team is able to drive, again, the moment Carson Beck misses a throw, Jade Barron's there or Makuba's there to take it to the house or just intercept it in general or just again make a play on the ball. So that's what I felt has been really good for Texas. Obviously, there's a lot more that we'd like to see. Availability would be nice with Vernon Broughton, not having him miss half of the game against Florida. That's gonna have its issues for the first half. But other than that, I love how the linebackers have been playing. I think the defensive line is still getting push up front, as long as they're not playing one of the best offensive line in the country, right? But that's every team. So that's been that's been the main point for me in terms of where they've been last year and what's been able to be the strong point of Texas um, post the Mississippi State game.
Yeah, that defensive line doing against Vanderbilt, definitely getting a push. And although you don't always see the results, you see the pressures and the errant throws or throws that maybe just aren't as good as they should be doing. Of course,
Yeah.
you don't see enough of those when a team is coming back and you're thinking,
Well,
this
that's the
guy
thing.
turns into Aaron Rodgers. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and to that point, like Diego Pavia, like he is a master at just like extending plays and looking like Johnny Manziel or like Doug Flutie out there, the way that he's just making guys miss and extending plays and receivers are able to get open. But at the end of that game, he was not able to do that. There was that fourth down where they had to go for it, and he scrambled out, and there was still nothing there for him to make any sort of play. So Texas defense has been clamping down on just a sense of how suffocating it is, and even when you feel like you've given yourself a chance, there's just another guy bearing down on you, kind of like Anthony Hill and just this linebacker core.
Yeah, all good points. Some other bright spots just to share the love to the offense, too. I mean, you really got to highlight. It seems like every week there's a different guy that steps up, Dylan. I know this wide receiver crew is fairly deep at the position. However, sometimes it seems like the whole crew is brought down, Dylan, and you have one guy that stands out. You would like to see really, rising tide lifts all boats. You'd like to see them all consistently hit that mark. But it seems like every other week, like I said, someone's stepping up. DeAndre Moore against Vanderbilt did his thing. Gunnar Helm occasionally just has these random games doing where he looks like, the greatest tight end in Texas history. And of course, I'm using that very loosely. However, he definitely has gone from, little to no draft stock doing prior to the season, although, of course, Texas fans really hyping him up, and rightfully so, just seeing what production he had in limited snaps. To now, it seems like he's one of the higher caliber tight ends in college football. We'll see about, future NFL draft stock when we get there. But
Yeah.
really, and you can see him hurdle doing from a mile away. Like when he's going to hurdle, you know it's coming.
And the DBs don't seem to
And the
know that he
DBs
wants
somehow
to
don't
hurdle
know.
at every moment. Yeah,
Meanwhile,
yeah, yeah.
I'm like from my seat, just kind of scrunching myself up because I'm ready for some sort of impact. But he just
Yeah.
always does it. But anyway, kudos to Helm for stepping up. Jatavian Sanders, huge year last year, big shoes to fill. Helm has done that to the best of his ability. Dylan Jatavian maybe could be split out wide a little more often, but it seems like Helm, at least in terms of a percentage of involvement, is fairly similar. So yet again, one more kudos. I'll give him the triple there for him. But then Matthew Golden, even with the impressive touchdown catch against Vanderbilt. I mean, you want to talk about Sports Center esque catches? that might be. I want to say number one this season, Dylan, but I'm sure I'm missing something. So I'll top three it as a safety blanket, but just impressive play there. But not to go bad, Dylan, but I do need to go bad once again. We harken back to the complementary football that this team needs to play if they want to go far, and we haven't seen that in the past weeks. Of course, the offense has been stalling, and it's one thing to stall, but the special teams has also not been great, Dylan. And I know we don't get to special teams a lot, and I love my kickers, so this is really tough. But the punting
Mm,
game for Texas has not been as great as it's been in I'd say recent years, but even that's a stretch. It even feels like the beginning of the year, Dylan, it was better. And I know there were some injuries, and then a punter change, and I think Michael Kern is back now. However, it just seems to be more of an issue. I know last year you didn't even have to worry about it with Sanborn, the graduate transfer that was punting for Texas last year. However, it seems like, and yet again, this is just no analytics behind the numbers here, but it seems like all the punts are going 10 yards less far, Dylan. How much in the end does that add up for a team like Texas, and how difficult does that make for the defense of Longhorns? Because it seems like most of the games they're now defending 50 yards instead of 60 or 70.
yeah. I mean, it's a lot. In terms of being able to have the entire middle of the field at your disposal when it comes to an offense and just starting there, it opens up the playbook more than starting at the 10 does, right? And that's just has to do with where you at, where you're at on the field, right? And the amount of time you have to get down the field, right? There's just a ton of stuff that's going through a play caller's head when you're in different spots on the field. And with the punting game like this, not not being up to par in all honesty with just the way that field position has been going, like you're talking about. And I be we're not punters, but just purely the optics of it, like it just doesn't look good coming off the foot. And the defense is put in a rough spot where just a win on defense is just allowing the field goal at that point, right? And I do want to say, like, it is funny. I mean, Texas is the sixth ranked team in the country. They're 6-1 or 7-1, sorry, at the moment. So they're still doing really well. Their only losses to a top three team in Georgia. So I feel
Yeah,
like we're focusing too much on the negative here when it comes down to I I think this has just been what the year is for the entirety of college football, and there's no top dog right now. Everyone's got a weakness of some sort. It's just how many weaknesses you have, and struggling on special teams. That's it's going to come back to bite you when it comes to the playoffs.
Dylan, I don't want to say you went into participation trophy mode there, but it seemed like a little bit those last 30 seconds. There's no top dog, but Dylan, if you want to become
How
the
is that
top
participate?
dog, if you want to become the top dog, how do you become the top
Hmm.
dog? By fixing those little errors your team is having, and of course, that's what
Yeah.
coaches do, Dylan. They focus in the lab, they get better, and this is one.
I'm just
I'm
saying,
only calling you up for
last
second here.
year, last year, the secondary was not good, right? And we were talking about it where the moment Texas plays a team, the good quarterback and great receivers, it's going to bite them, right? I'm just saying. So I feel like there has been a lot of improvement off of last year in terms of balance, right? And Texas doesn't have the same glaring weaknesses, but there are some minor things that we're able to critique, right? So I think this is good, right?
Yeah,
You would agree with me on
to
this.
to go further to your point though, last year you could point out that pass defense as being the weakness for Texas. It was only a matter of time before someone took advantage of that. Now the punting game, not the punt return, but the punting side of things, not as glaring as you're saying, but definitely a point that a team can and will take advantage of that given the opportunity. And you talked about Georgia doing just that yet again. Seemed like most of their scoring possessions, I believe it was like 75% or more, came from within the other side of the field. And Dylan,
Yeah,
that
I mean,
that's what you're talking about right there.
I again, that's a problem, right? But I don't think it's as glaring as it was last year. So yeah,
Maybe
that's what I
for
have to say on this. I'm just saying
overall
it.
team weaknesses, yes. For punting, no, because this year has not been as superb because last year's yet again Texas. I don't know where they find these punters doing. They just appear. It's like you're having a hallucination, and then you see somewhere in the distance above all the lines and the horizon. You just see this Australian or this graduate transfer from Stanford. You name it. Texas. We'll see how comfortable, excuse me, they feel with Kern. He's a freshman too. I know people don't like to think about the backstory on punters, Dylan, but he's got talent. It's just a matter of really, I think maybe also just recovering from whatever ailment he had, and just getting into the loop and swing at things. But
Yeah.
enough to talk about punting, Dylan. Were there any other points, pro or con, that you'd like to talk about Texas rather quickly?
Pros, I have to say, I, again, the running back situation. Baxter being out, not good, right? That's an understatement. There's just a lot of things for Texas where there's injuries here and there. It's just, we're even talking about it's just these little things that seem to pop up where a guy misses some time, right? So there's some things that are not in alignment for Texas, but I feel like that they've been still able to battle through those. They found a solid player in Wisner and a good complement to him with Blue in terms of just the change of pace when it comes to running backs and who's able to do what, right? Offensive line got their stuff back together against Vanderbilt. So there's ups and downs, but it's not this big giant wave. And I think Texas is going to be just fine going into these next few games. Florida, it's a good matchup for them, right? Arkansas is going to be a tough place to play, right? But as long as they're playing Texas football, they have a great chance. And then you got Kentucky, right? So those games will be good for Texas to get things rolling. Then you got to head into Kyle Field. Foreshadow.
108,000 strong, Kyle Field.
Foreshadow. Yeah.
Yeah, it.
I don't like their black jerseys. I think they should all be wearing maroon. But that's
No,
my A&M take for today.
I, I'm in the same camp there. I think at home you got to wear
Mhm.
maroon, but maybe that's just
Yeah.
watching Texas not changing up their jerseys as well, having a little bit of an impact. But doing pros, definitely like you said, the running back situation entering the year not too optimistic. Maybe Texas has not played at their level of expectancy at the running back position, just in terms of year in and year out because of that injury. However, definitely surpassed expectations in terms of what has happened this year with Wisner and Blue. And one last little con, I hate to end on that, Dylan, but the start to ball games has not been great for Texas offensively. I know we were talking about the issues, but if they really just clean up that first quarter, they'd be putting themselves in a great position for the rest of the game and not having to worry so much on the tail end side of things. I know against Oklahoma they caught some breaks, but guys, yet again, Oklahoma not that
Yeah.
great.
Listen, I just feel like sometimes listening to you talk and other people, specifically Texas fans, it just feels like Texas is like 1-6 right now. That's all I'm saying. Like,
I'm sorry I can be critical of a good team, Dylan. I apologize.
mm, mm,
Yeah. Anyway, we'll let y'all go on that little point. What do you guys think about Texas to this point in the season? And what do you think about their pros and cons of recent play? Am I being too critical? Are you on Dylan's side? Let me know down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, have a great rest of your day.